Matt, tell us what is Farcaster hubs according to you?
The way I like to think about it is they're kind of like Ethereum nodes, right? They sync the network. They store, I don't know how many messages it is, but a certain amount of messages per person, right? It gets synced on the network. And if you run a hub, you can basically pull down the entire state of the network, in real time, get new events. So imagine like the Twitter fire hose that everyone talks about. Like you can literally get that. And I was running their example of like Postgres, where you replicate the hub into a more friendly database format and just see like the example of like stream events coming in, like, message here, message there, like follow, like, right, cast, like you just see it coming in. It's pretty cool. Like it's very small scale right now, so I don't know what it looks like at like 100 million users. It's going to be a lot different, but right now it's very cool and it's somewhat manageable. Like, it's like a new event every few seconds. And so I guess the only other context that I would add is the data is kind of confusing to work with, and so Manan, obviously you're doing a startup around making this a lot easier, which is cool. And so I've been messing around with. I'm using Neynar's APIs, which I don't know if there's show notes in this podcast, but we can link to them. But yeah, so I've been playing around with that and with the Hub replicator repo, which Merkle put out. And then building my own like Prisma client version of all of this. And so that's why I thought I was curious to talk about it, just because I feel like there's a big gap right now in like the hub data itself versus like, if you get it into a really friendly format, what you can actually do with it is pretty awesome in terms of building. So
I'm just gonna ask Dom real quick. I want to understand why Farcaster hubs are unique compared to like, some features other chains permit. Like, why is Farcaster hubs a unique concept? I mean, anyone can pitch in here. Anyone can pitch in.
Yeah, well, it's unique from Ethereum because like, right, if you're posting messages on chain, in the case of Lens, you have to sign every message. It's on chain, right? So you have to kind of go through Ethereum. There's probably a bunch of other considerations there. Farcaster hubs, right? It's their own network. It's purpose built for this. And they can upgrade it however they want, right? You can't upgrade a contract as easily. And then on the other hand, right, like what does having a hub system give you versus like a decentralized node system give you versus like a Twitter style database? Well, it's uncensorable, right? One hub can't just like censor the network. It can't go down as easily as something like Twitter. It could go down for probably a few different reasons, right? But it's not going to go down, right? Because like, one company shuts down their database, right? If I shut off my hub, the network doesn't go down. And so it's kind of this like, ideally this like unstoppable, uncensorable thing that just kind of runs. But unlike email, right, you actually store the data in the hubs, right? So you're not relying on a company's servers to store the data, which is the big difference that I think of in relation to something like email, where you have to rely on like Gmail to store your messages.
Yeah, the way I've been thinking about this is like, so currently my day job is basically building a search indexer on medical data. And so like I've been reading into like, how is Google search so fast? And like, obviously a big part of like what makes Google search so fast is that like Google itself is like a very large distributed computer all around the world. But only like Google has access to those servers. Google has access to write to the servers. And the way I think about hubs is like, it's a distributed computer. It's not a blockchain, but it's a distributed computer that stores and syncs data across the different hubs. I don't know the technical details of how it stores a certain volume of data, but there is an upper limit to how much data can be stored. And I believe it's somewhere around, I think 6 months of data. I think like that's a rough approximate for like what the actual limit is itself. But it's like, and anyone can sort of run a hub, right? So as opposed to like where only Google servers can actually work on that distributed computer. In hubs, anyone can sort of run a hub. And I'm assuming Manan, feel free to come in now. You guys probably are running hubs and then making it easier to interact with them.
Yeah, so yes, we are running hubs for our customers. Just a little bit of background as well. So I lead engineering for Neynar. Neynar makes it easier for developers to build on top of Farcaster right now. And then we're going to expand to other Web3 social protocols as we go along as well. In terms of like hubs, I would describe them as, like Matthew put it, like very similar to nodes on Ethereum, but hubs essentially don't run any blockchain, but they do write to blockchains if needed on behalf of users. So, for example, like verifying events that a signer was approved. So there are some integrations to, let's say, an Optimism, RPC, to kind of like scan for events that might be happening on chain or user registering and whatnot. But essentially, like we think of hubs as core infrastructure that is required for like interacting with Farcaster, and we generally like want to make it as easy as possible for developers to interact and then build applications on top of Farcaster. So abstracting this away and kind of like building a sort of like alchemy-like interface for Farcaster has been one of our short-term goals. Yeah.
So let's say Brian, like if Brian wanted to start using hubs from Lonely, how can he use Neynar to do that?
Yeah, so today we have like multiple pricing systems, but I'm going to talk about the read-only like basic tier that everybody can access. Brian can go to Neynar.com, subscribe. He'll get an email within like 10 minutes or so, giving him a hub URL and an example snippet of like how he can start utilizing it. So the hub will be fully synced. He'll be able to read data off of that. In order to write, right now we don't restrict writes on the base tier, but we do plan to, and higher tiers will be able to write to the protocol. So anybody would be able to create a read app based on Farcaster data at the base tier. But then as you upgrade to the next tier, you'll be able to write to the protocol as a bot or on behalf of yourself or on behalf of other users as well.
Do you?
Interesting.
Are you?
Ahead,
Is there a like if I'm interacting with the Warpath API, is that being deprecated and I have to use the hub now? If I like, for example, I do a really easy check where I just see if an address is associated with a Farcaster account, and then I just give them a badge, right? Is that something that I'm gonna have to start using hubs to do, or can I still just use like their generic API there?
Yeah, we do have APIs that provide the active badge as part of the profiles. So now, if you're using Neynar APIs, our V1 APIs exactly replicate the Warcast API. So, like path for path, we've tried to replicate everything that we can at the protocol level. There was some information in the Warcast APIs which is only like specific to the Warcast client. For example, like the location data in profiles, that is not at the protocol level. So we can't really provide that. But everything at the protocol level, we have replicated in the Neynar APIs for the V1 APIs that we have.
Okay. So Warpcast is going to remove their own APIs, and essentially they want everyone to be using hubs, right?
Yes, I either use hubs or use like our APIs. Hubs, I'll add one thing, like as to like why hubs, like what are hubs and like why they're harder to deal with for applications. Hubs, they contain a gossip client. The gossip client essentially is optimized for transmitting messages across the entire network, meaning the messages are optimized for the transport layer. They are not optimized for the application layer, the presentation layer. So it means that like if you want to develop richer applications, hubs will not kind of like work for beyond like a certain type of application that you want to build on hub data. You will have to create an indexer or build your own APIs in order to have like really fast APIs that you can build richer applications. So you can think of this as Ethereum nodes. Like you can't just use the Ethereum nodes and the RPC that Ethereum nodes provide to build like a rich NFT application, you will have to, in order to like get which tokens does this particular address own, like you'll have to index certain data in a certain way to make that query really fast. So Alchemy not just like provides that node service, but it also provides APIs, indexed APIs on top to be able to help presentation layer applications to build faster.
Yeah, it's essentially like middleware, right? Like that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. Like the APIs, I would say like constitute the middle layer of like making it so that the presentation layer can be built really fast. The hubs are mostly like just optimized for the transport layer.
Got it. And so I'm curious, like every time you spin up, like a customer wants to use the Neynar API, are you spinning up a dedicated hub for them, or is it possible for you to sort of share hubs for customers? And just like curious around like what are the limitations of like using a hub or like sharing a hub as different people?
Yeah, great question. So right now, we definitely share hubs and bandwidth based on like how many subscribers are using it, as well as like what is the usage across each one. So we have a load balancer that balances across like multiple hubs that we run, and all our customers, like they just hit the load balancer. In terms of dedicated hubs, there's nothing additional that current customers want with regards to dedicated hubs that they can't already get with shared hubs right now. But I would imagine like a large application like Warpcast would want a dedicated hub just to make sure that they're getting index, like they're getting data transmitted throughout the network really fast. And so if they're utilizing a lot of like the read-write functionality at the hub level, then they might want something dedicated. Right now, for most customers that we have, like the shared model works just fine.
Yeah. So
Okay.
as I understand
Sorry, go
it
ahead.
today, okay. You want to?
No. Finish your thought.
Okay. Right now, if I understand it, there is a storage contract. A storage contract essentially is like, is this person paying to store their data on a Farcaster hub? That makes sense because you do want some sort of spam limitation to prevent people from just spamming the network and clogging it up. But like, have you had any conversations around like what is the actual purpose of the usage of those funds? Like, is that money going to be going to people who run the hubs? Like, I'm just curious. Like, obviously there's money going in, but like, is there a purpose for that money?
No, dude, Dan's annoying about that. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to launch a token, and he wants to charge you for running hubs. And I think I've talked to him extensively about this, about how he needs to explore monetization.
As hub runners, we don't have to pay anything. The end users need to pay for the storage. But it's currently going into a protocol treasury, and Brian's right. Like Dan has not like designed like how the protocol treasury is supposed to kind of like be distributed, etc. Hub runners right now are mainly doing it for decentralized incentivization and making sure that Farcaster is actually decentralized, as well as maybe even to build applications on top of Farcaster. So maybe eventually, like the protocol evolves to a point where like this does get distributed back to hub runners, in some shape or form. But right now, it's a centralized protocol treasury that's controlled by the Farcaster protocol team.
Got it. Okay.
But like if a user has to pay to have their data stored on the Farcaster hub, like won't that prevent them from using an application? Like won't that just be like a friction point for new users to be interacting with new apps on Farcaster? Like,
Yeah.
ideally.
So the current plan is Warpcast to be able to kind of have a flow where they can use something like in-app purchases or Apple Pay to be able to kind of just sign up and pay for that. And Warpcast would internally handle doing the transaction on chain to be able to allow them to use Warpcast. Otherwise, they can always like navigate Warpcast in a read-only mode, I guess. But yes, it is going to be a friction point, and I think it's by design, as Tayyab mentioned. Like, it'll help in some spam prevention as well, I guess, if people are just coming into lower the
because like because that's the problem right now with like I mean, dude, like I mean, just like think about this, right? Like, okay, if you have unlimited write access to a hub and there's no cost, right? Because like basically, like you're not actually paying gas fees to send a cast into a hub. I could literally start up a computer and just say "Hello World," and I can just spam the entire network, and you've DDoSed all of hubs. So like, I actually think it's an important limitation for creating like a healthy network. And it's interesting that like this protocol actually has revenue. Again, like ENS is a great example of something that has revenue. Whereas like Uniswap struggled for a long time for like the protocol itself to have revenue. And I would argue that protocol revenue is like a key unlock for people to actually build protocols. It's just like, it's unclear what the money is being used for. And like, obviously I know that you're not sort of in charge of what the hell happens to that money, but like, I'm actually very pro paying for storage. It's just like, okay, but now what do we do with this? It's like
can hubs talk to each other?
They that's all they do is they talk to each other.
Wait, so I can use, like, let's say I'm trying to build like a music app on top of Farcaster, and let's say I somehow want to use, let's say Unlonely was using Farcaster hubs, and I somehow want to use some of that data to maybe like personalize stuff for some user on this new music app I'm using, right? I'm building. Can I read data from Unlonely's Farcaster hub?
Yeah.
Wait, what was the question?
So I can, but like it's not really tied to a user, is it?
You just pull down data from the network. It's all one thing, right?
But see, okay, that's interesting, because in Web 2, isn't it like that? Like people are selling others' data in order to, help other applications build personalization.
Yeah.
So like, where's the decentralization in this? Does that make sense?
Repeat the question.
So like,
yeah.
okay,
I think it's the opposite, right?
What
Like,
I'm saying is like,
centralized.
well, I guess like if I'm reading data from another person's Farcaster hub, let's say I want that data to help build my application. I can just do that if I want to. And they're not really monetizing from selling that data, right?
The thing is that data doesn't belong to the other application. It's broadcasted by people on the network. So like it's open, and the decentralization comes from the fact that like anybody can access that data.
Okay.
Level playing field versus like let's say X, you'd have to pay like $50,000 for an API today to be able to access that data, etc.
But like if it's true decentralization as a user, since I paid for my data to be stored on the specific hub that is now being used from this other application, shouldn't there be some monetary incentive where, let's say I'm building a new app, I want to use your data, I pay you as the user because you let me use your data?
Someone in the chat said these Farcaster technical calls make simple things seem more complicated.
No, I'm just asking as a question. I'm just curious.
I think it's funny.
Football terms. Okay. Damn.
I don't have an answer for
Yes,
you.
you guys.
I don't know what's happening. I also have to leave, guys. I have a meeting in 2 minutes. Thank you for having me. I'm gonna do.
Brian said,
Where's
I have
the
nothing to
incentive?
contribute, I'm out.
Right? Like the incentive is to not publish data to hubs, right? Because then you don't let other people access your data, right? If you think about like, how does Facebook make money, right? They make money on having data about you, right? In the case of Farcaster, it's beneficial to have the hubs to be able to build an open network, but also, Ishika, are you frozen? No, you're not.
No.
It's beneficial to have the hubs as like a single network to be able to build cool stuff on top of one another and like have this, just have this like social media protocol. But then at the same time, like look at Warpcast with their location feature, right? If they get a bunch of people to give them their location, what is their incentive to publish that for every other app on the protocol, except Goodwill, right?
I would assume that a part of it is like there has to be some level of transparency with the client, where like the client is like for example, like I want to use Farcaster and I want to use a non-Warpcast client. When I send a cast, I want it to show up in Farcaster in the hub, because if it doesn't, then I know that these guys are not doing the thing that I want them to be doing, and I can't use this other client, right? So like I would be less likely to use a client that way, because it's like, hey, why is my data not showing? Well, it's because this client isn't playing by the rules, and like, there is some sort of like social layer that will exist that helps people be like, hey, like this is the expectation. And where you're talking about like the location, I do think there's probably some level of like transparency that'll be required to say like, hey, like this is information we are putting into the hub. This is information we are not putting into the hub. I would imagine that that's something that would need to happen, or like eventually we would probably get to that point. I mean, I don't want my location data I'm okay with it on Warpcast, but probably not okay with it on Farcaster.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Even your city.
Yeah, probably not. I maybe not, right? I don't know.
Just like functional is there, right? Like it's like you just ping the Warpcast API.
Or like maybe some sort of like zero knowledge layer could be added to this, where they could see your location but not attribute it to you.
Yeah, it's kind of complicated though.
Yeah, that's even more complicated.
I wanted to go back to a point. I think Tayyab, you made before around like spamming the network, right? Like putting a bunch of hello worlds. I could go and do that right now, right? Like I just take one of my test accounts and start spamming. Like, is there anything in the protocol that stops that? No, right? Like,
so if I remember correctly, there is a like limit to how much data your data is stored on the hub. So like, go ahead.
You would be able to do that. But then as soon as you hit like 5,000 messages, and this includes likes, recasts, etc., the previous ones would start getting pruned.
Okay, yeah.
So, the other avenue that I think Warpcast has today is Warpcast has filtering or shadow bans of sorts, where low quality content automatically gets filtered. And this is something that clients will have to build. So if somebody's building a Farcaster client, they'll have to do the filtering from the hub data, the indexed data that they have, and sort of not surface lower quality content if they don't want to. But it's optional. It's not enforced at the protocol level.
So is this something you guys are thinking about? Like you could provide as a valuable service to like me as an app developer? It's like not have to worry about like,
yes,
like any of this stuff.
Yes, we're speccing that out right now in terms of like how we want to do this. It's definitely like a very gnarly problem, because there's spam, which is like non-malicious, low quality content that gets put out. But then there's malicious spam, like on Twitter, where you'll see the reply bots trying to fish for transacting and like leaking funds through like MetaMask transactions, etc. So there's different categories, and we'll have to deal with this separately. All of our different like customers will also want like different solutions. So we're gonna have to come up with a system that's more of a, hey, choose your settings kind of an approach. Still thinking through some of the technical details on that, but yes, we've already started thinking in that direction.
Matt, also the other part is like, there's probably gonna, I would not say that Farcaster is like censorship resistant, because like if all of them decide that, hey, if we see nipples in a picture, we're not going to allow it, right? Like they could do that. If you implement it at like a protocol level, like you absolutely could kind of get rid of that stuff. So, and like even in like Ethereum nodes, there are different implementations of the node itself. So that node could say, hey, like certain types of data I'm not going to allow, and it would try to sync it with everyone else. But if everyone else does not agree to that same level, you're like there is going to be sort of like a mismatch on data. Manan probably knows better than I do around like what happens if like one hub, right? Like they use basically all this the same systems, but they do a different implementation where they say, hey, like we will just never allow pornography at the hub level. Like that's just what we care about. What would happen in that case where they block certain content, but the other ones do not? What would even happen in that case?
Yeah. In that case, like there's a couple of ways to go about it. A hub can essentially not accept messages that it doesn't want to. So
Okay.
It'll ignore messages around that particular content. So let's say it detected a cast coming in with objectionable content, and it didn't want to surface that. It'll ignore that message, not add it to its own index. It'll ignore any likes, recasts that happen on that piece of content as well. So, but the content can still live on amongst the other hubs. The other hubs and the applications built on those can still continue surfacing that data. And to the point you made earlier around like, hey, what if all hubs decide that this is not something that we want on the protocol? Let's say even if like one single person wants to have that content, they can feel free to run their own hub and kind of like see if other hubs on the network actually want to accept that data or not. But essentially, like at the protocol level, like where like all the transport is happening for messages, it won't stop you from transmitting those messages. You will have to stop it at the level of like acceptance of those messages at a hub level.
Yeah, and that's where I think it gets kind of interesting, because like right now I would say hubs are pretty like homogenous, right? It's probably the same implementation across all hubs, but at some point somebody's going to decide, hey, I want to go in a different direction, and that's when it's going to be interesting. Is like, okay, well, do you follow this hub or do you follow this set of hubs, and like what data is replicated? And like, I don't know, probably need to get Varun on the call to be like, okay, Varun, what the hell would happen in this situation? And because they've probably thought about this.
So Chandresh in the chat asked, how do you make sure there is no 51% attack on hubs? Is that like possible? No consensus, no 51% attack.
You need as many hubs as possible, right? You just like it's same thing with Ethereum, right? You need like a diversity of hubs around the world, right? No?
I think it's a little different because it's not a blockchain.
Yeah, it's not a blockchain, so there's no 51% attack. Essentially, like a 51% attack is only possible if there is a blockchain, and like it's only really a problem where consensus is involved, where everybody in the network needs to agree on something. And hubs are not structured that way. Like not everybody doesn't need to agree that this is the state of the network.
Yeah,
because it's hashing.
Yeah, so it's kind of almost like a stateful sort of like TCP/IP / like HTTP or TCP/IP kind of almost, where it's like, hey, like this is a set of data that we collect and store, and like here's what it looks like, and then you can have different servers and different versions of servers accepting and rejecting and transmitting whatever kind of data that they want. I think like, again, like that's where I think it's like getting confusing for me now, where it's like, okay, well, like if we have different implementations and they cannot agree on a state, then like how do we know which hubs to read from? And maybe this is like a problem in the future, but I can imagine that like it will likely happen at some point.
Like Wait,
No.
so if the data is stored off chain, is it possible for like a hub like owner to be able to change that data?
Yes, you can actually write in the past. So you can say that you said something like 3 months ago.
Well,
I could add that as a hub owner.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think the only way to do that would they would have to be like forge their signature, which would be like really hard to do.
no. You as long as you are the one writing to the network, you can say that you said something 3 months ago.
Okay. So if I am also a hub runner and a user, I could say, hey, I said Bitcoin is going to hit 27,500 6 months ago. Like, look at me, I'm like amazing at predicting Bitcoin prices, and so now I think it's going to go to 2950 or 29,000. You guys should all buy Bitcoin. That's like I could see how it could be a very dangerous thing to happen.
But then, well, is that kind of like a security risk?
So I'm not sure, but like I mean, a security risk for some angles in terms of like being able to claim something that is incorrect. But Farcaster today does not have any timestamping mechanism. Like in order to have something timestamped, you need to have a blockchain. And Lens kind of like does this where like, okay, all of their content is on a blockchain, and so like everything is timestamped. But Farcaster is built in a way where like not all things need to be on a blockchain. Not all things need to be timestamped. Only important things need to be timestamped. So I'm imagining that there will be a client in the future, or maybe even Webcast does this, where you can actually mint a cast or like put it on chain. And that is essentially like timestamping a particular cast, meaning you've now made it so that you have a verifiable proof on a blockchain that says that this cast existed at this particular date and time. And
that makes sense.
That's going to be optional. Like not everybody is going to want to like put their cast on a blockchain.
But yeah, and there's like a cost with it. But that makes sense though, right? Because it's like, hey, I'm pointing to this piece of data. I got it from here. I can prove that I got it from here. And then now I can like cement it in like immortality and say like I had this cast or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, if you think about this is no different than the current internet. If you have your own blog post, you can backdate a blog post to whatever previous date that you want, saying that, okay, you wrote this like a number of days ago, which is why people believe in the Internet Archive machine or like the Wayback Machine more than they do with regards to dates when blog posts are published, etc. Right? You reference the Wayback Machine when you want to point to like, okay, this is what it looked like in the past. And the Wayback Machine is kind of like the blockchain. Even that is not really like the blockchain because it's centrally controlled by somebody.
Correct.
But a blockchain would be like the real way to do timestamping where there was consensus that this particular piece of content was produced at this time, or at least existed at this time.
But functionally, how like so in the hub, right? There's a timestamp. So is that timestamp basically when the hub submitted the piece of information that that the event happened?
Yes, exactly. And you can try to change this, by the way. Like since you were interacting with hubs, Matthew, you can try to change it to a later date and see if the hub accepts it, and it should. I don't think there's anything that's blocking at a hub level from accepting a transaction that is at an older date.
Interesting.
Matt, what are you doing with Hub right now?
Well, so Manan, I don't know if you saw. I think you saw my thing in the chat, but basically, I think I was pestering Rish about this, not you, but I was basically pestering Rish and saying like, hey, like the APIs are really cool, but I use Prisma. I don't use REST APIs like to access data, and so basically I'm stuck indexing from the Warpcast API, and then similarly from Neynar's API. Like functionally, it's no different. And instead of having to index, and instead of having to make then okay, so you index, right? You put it into your own database, and then you can kind of do whatever you want with it. The other option, which I'm doing right now, is using this hub replicator that Warpcast, the team, put out, which is basically replicating the data from the hub into a Postgres database. And in theory, right now, I can kind of deal with it however I want, in the same way I'm like indexing from the APIs. It's like in my database. But the Warpcast hub replicator that they have, the data that it outputs is very unfriendly, like in its formatting. Like it kind of gives you just the raw output from the hubs. And so it doesn't have any relations. It has like byte arrays instead of hashes, which I learned what those were a couple of days ago, instead of strings, I should say. And so it kind of has a bunch of unfriendly formatting things, which, to Manan's point from before, if you want to build an application, like the way that hubs talk to each other is not super friendly to that. So for example, right, if I want to get the replies to the cast, and then the author of all of those casts, I have to get the cast, then I have to query for all of the information about the author, which comes in individual messages, right? So it's not a single object. It's like the stream of messages of someone having updated their profile. And then I have to do that for every individual reply. It's like 20 calls, all in, to get like a page of casts. And so when I'm doing this FarChat thing, it ended up making my application super, super slow. And so what I did was I'm actually like in the finishing stages of it. I have one bug I'm trying to fix, and then I'm going to start publishing it to the dev chat. What I did is I took the hub replicator that Warpcast built, and I rebuilt it as a sort of like a relation-friendly version, like something that has relations, something that's in a little bit more friendly of a schema, where like you get the user object as a user object. You get like casts. You can see the replies with like a very easy call in this thing called Prisma, rather than having to like make separate queries. And so it's a lot easier to work with. And for example, like in a single database call, I can get the most popular cast that contains the term Kiwi, and then the top replies based on like filtering based on a list of users, and like by likes, right? Like I can kind of like do a bunch of stuff, which like in theory you could do in SQL, but it's a lot harder, especially if you aren't like good with SQL, and it's probably more like complex in terms of like the kind of underlying like work being done. And so something like Prisma or GraphQL can kind of do that really easily. And so like TLDR, it made the data like basically just easier to work with, in hopes that like the Warpcast team and maybe Manan and Rish like would basically say, oh, like this is a good way to work with the data. This guy basically made a hacky version of it. We should actually make this like the preferred way. That's kind of my so yeah, that's coming out hopefully later today.
Nice. That's cool to hear. And yeah, we'll definitely look into Prisma as well as GraphQL. Yep.
Awesome.
Cool.
Do we want to give Manan some time back? And then I know Matt
Manan,
wanted to
thank
talk
you.
some silly ideas.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
I learned so
Alright,
much.
awesome.
I learned
Thanks
so
a lot.
much about hubs.
I have so many more questions. Varun's coming up next.
Yeah, we got to get Varun on here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Next one will be like we'll be with Varun.
Cool.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Manan.
Thank you, Manan.
Yeah, we actually should get Varun on here. That would be pretty cool.
Because yeah,
Guys,
I have
I
like so
knew
many
nothing
questions.
about hubs.
I
Yeah.
have a lot of questions about what happens when they go out of sync.
Yeah.
Mm.
I kind of like I don't think I fully understand the like 51% attack like not being an issue, like and the fact that it's like that there's no consensus. Like I need to read more on that.
Well, like 51% attack is like if I own 51% or more of 51% or more of all the Ethereum nodes, I can just print money, right? So it's a bigger problem because you're dealing with money, and I can just print money as much as I want. Whereas like on hubs, if I have more than 51%, I can create fake data, but like if the other ones are like, hey, like I don't have this data, and like you can kind of like look into it and be like, yeah, I can just go to this one. I can just grab the data from these people. That's where I'm like a little fuzzier. That like again probably need Varun, but we can move on from hubs.
I wanted to bring up something which I put in the chat.
I know. I was hoping you'd bring it up.
An hour ago. I mean, I have a very specific idea, which is kind of like Farmville, Animal Crossing, Sim City, like that kind of thing. But the broader question is, why aren't there more Farcaster games in the works? And like, is that a good idea? And the pretext for this is like if you look at Facebook, right? Facebook app ecosystem, Farcaster ecosystem, like they're kind of parallels in a lot of ways, right? Like that's kind of the analogy to look back at. And the thing that was most popular on Facebook's app ecosystem were games, right? Like Farmville was the most popular app for a while and then I think it was like Cityville. There was like a poker game, right? And so
Mafia, what was it? What was something?
Yeah, there was like Mafia Wars.
Wait, I love Animal Crossing.
Yeah, me too. What if we just had like Animal Crossing World, like for Farcaster, right? Everyone has their own little like thing. But then I look at like, Gather Town, right? No one uses Gather Town, right? And so the question I've been asking myself, and selfishly, like, is there like an opportunity to like start a infrastructure or business or something here, right? But like, but just as a product question, like, what kinds of things does Farcaster unlock to be able to build something that actually could work, like in the same way that Facebook worked, right? Where like you see that someone like sent you something, right, in your Facebook feed, right? Like there's kind of like these things that Facebook would do to insert the game into your experience, and that made it more sticky. So like, is that something that Farcaster could also serve the purpose of?
So, I mean, I would distinguish Farcaster in two different ways. It's like hubs versus like the network. I think the network, it would probably be interesting, right? Like if you could come up with a game that like if you could just like hop in like random Among Us rooms with like people on Farcaster, I would play that. And like you win, like you play the game and like, I don't know, you like win an NFT or something. Like I'd imagine that would work. I don't know if you've heard, there's a company called Lattice. Lattice.xyz or Lattice, like something to do with like autonomous worlds, but they're basically like building Minecraft on
what?
They're building Minecraft on their like own OP chain. So like they have an OP chain or chain built in the OP stack, and then like they're building Minecraft on top of it. It was actually the first major example of someone forking the OP chain code base to turn it into something useful, which became the inspiration for OP stack.
That's
cool. So cool.
So like the hubs I think would be like kind of useful, but not like really useful. But the network itself of like FIDs could be really interesting, especially like once you have interoperability between chains. So like what you could say is like, hey, I'm going to launch my own OP stack chain and I'm going to run Farmville on there, or Mafia Wars, or Among Us, whatever, literally anything. And you could read the FID, and like you could use the FID in the game itself. That's like I can see how there would be like a ton of value in that.
There's someone made a mini, it's not really a game, but somewhat of a game, Farcantasy.
Oh, that was Borodutch, I think. Wow.
Yeah. It would be cool to have like.
Yeah, because I think Niche bought my card, and then I was like, "Why? Who owns my card? Like, why don't I own it?" Right? So it's kind of funny that like people were trading each other's things. Like, it's kind of like a friend tech kind of thing before that actually took off.
Okay, so I actually think that someone could build a friend tech on top of Farcaster, and I think it would do really well.
Why?
Why? Because speculation works. Because speculation happens to be the only reason why crypto has gotten adoption in the past 12 years.
I feel like concepts like friend tech is just like morally wrong.
Why? Right?
Can we share
what is morally wrong about it?
Yeah. What is morally wrong about it?
Buying and selling you,
But you're not buying and selling me. You're buying and selling access to me.
Do you guys see this?
Is that not morally wrong? I feel like, how is my worth determined by who's buying and selling me?
I think there are a few things that are morally. You shouldn't kill somebody. You shouldn't harm somebody. You shouldn't abuse somebody. After that, it's kind of,
Look, people are going to do it. It's like morally wrong or not.
Getting drunk, getting belligerently drunk, and like, you know, passing out, is that morally wrong? In some cultures, yes. In some cultures, no.
Yeah, that's true. But okay,
Like,
whatever.
I don't know. In the crypto world, is buying your access to your friends, is that morally wrong? I don't know.
Hey, you're not buying access. You're not buying shares, right? You're just buying keys.
Yeah, you're just buying keys. It's
No.
all marketing.
No.
It's all marketing. Anyways,
Okay,
what were you saying?
So, well, can we talk about? You guys saw this Jam thing, right? Like Jam, all of a sudden, like they now want to do this. I don't know what.
This is the first time I'm seeing this.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
they posted about it on Farcaster, saying like they wanted to do like the friend tech for Farcaster thing. I don't know what the like status of it is. Like it seems it's like kind of like I don't know. It seemed a little spammy to me from when I first saw it, and like also it's Jam, which is like a different client. So I don't know what's happening, but this is the thing that I've seen that's closest to it. Like,
yeah, I mean,
just,
even if you think about like what Brian is doing on Unlonely, people are doing like airdrop tokens. Like, okay, the tokens don't have like any value today. I don't know what like the legality of any of these tokens are, but like, you know, hey, I'm just gonna drop you a bunch of tokens. Freaking Cameron took his shirt off in the middle of a stream because I don't know. I think people had creator token. They were like, hey, I want you to do this. And in the middle of a stream, he just took his shirt off. So like, I don't know. The internet is a weird place. Like, just let it be weird, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, friend tech, I don't know. Interesting idea. Do you really think it would work on Farcaster though? Like,
I mean, dude, it would. Here's my answer: is like speculation works. Just like, bro, why are we sitting here talking about Ethereum? Because we all have Ethereum bags that we're holding, and we're like, we want the value of Ethereum to go up. I think like that is one of the biggest reasons.
Whoa, I'm interested in it for the technology.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like it's like Bitcoin. There are people in Ethereum who like won't like talk about Solana. They're like, oh, Solana is like this or Solana is like that. Well, actually, Solana has some value to the world, but like people can't get past their like religious beliefs to be like, oh, there's actually value in why this thing kind of exists.
Well,
I don't know.
What do we all think about Solana?
Wait, we will save that convo for next time. Our time is ending, but I also wanted to talk about like the new users on Farcaster and them like getting into the community. But I feel like we can talk about that next time with the whole waitlisting getting removed.
Yes, and I think Ted talked about this today, and I will +1 her. But we need more women on Farcaster.
Oh yeah, I actually don't. That is so true.
Like 100%. Like it is a male-dominated thing, and like that is not going to head in a positive direction if we only have like one gender representing the entire community.
I didn't like realize it because I feel like Farcaster has a good amount of anonymous kind of profile, so you can't tell.
But I think Ted's point was that it's like what I forget, male coded is the word she used. Like it's just like embedded in the network itself, like what things people talk about, like that kind of thing.
I mean, but because it is mostly men. Like if you were to get
right.
more
100%.
women on, I'm sure it would like slowly drift so more towards the middle.
Like the way I feel like everyone knows this, right? It's like in some ways it's obvious, right? Like maybe by talking about it more, that's the only way you like fix the problem, right? But
yeah, correct. I mean, look, I invited my previous co-founder. She was a female. I invited my wife. I invited her co-founder of her newsletter. Tried to add as many people, but none of those three are active on Farcaster either. So maybe the content also is not. I think that was her second point. Like, we need to engage with their content to make them feel more welcomed. Because like if I come in and it's like it just feels, and I don't know, maybe because I'm a guy, I don't feel it as much. But like maybe the content feels. I don't know if it feels male centric, but it definitely feels. It
doesn't feel male-centric. It just feels like you need a certain level of knowledge to be able to participate, which I think is a big barrier. So that's why I want to really talk about like all these new users coming in that don't have
we need
that knowledge.
Panels.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, this was great, guys. Thank you.
All right, okay. I I mean, we could keep talking. I don't know if you guys have to go anywhere.
I have to run. But you
Okay.
guys, if you guys want to keep
Michigan's a
talking,
busy
you can
gal. Well, I need to go. I should probably go write code.
I
Anybody
should
play
too, but-
Starfield? But
Matthew, just because you have no dates doesn't mean you can just sit here and chat with us all day.
oh my god, we're not
All
gonna.
right,
We're gonna
talking
pull
about my
this up.
dating life on another episode.
Yo, we should do speeding
If
for
anyone
Matt.
has a Prisma experience that can help me, Tayyab,
I don't know shit about Prisma, my friend. I couldn't even. No, I don't know shit about Prisma. I'm over here worried about searches, bro. I'm like learning about search indexing. Like that's where my head is.
Is this for like is this for one of the companies you're helping out?
Yeah, correct. So like they have a very, very large set of medical imagery. And like so like they need a way for their customers to be able to quickly search through their data sets so that their customers feel comfortable about it. And like I'm trying to figure that out. So that's what my day looks like. Or my
Using
life.
betting.
That's actually cool.
Yeah. I mean it's a great product. Or they have a great direction of a company, and like getting medical imagery is like a pain in the butt. But once you get it, like it is a massive opportunity. So
Awesome. Cool, guys. I'll see you next week.
All right.
This
Bye,
was
everybody.
fun. Bye. Thank you, guys. Bye. All right.